From the Ticats Audio Network, this is a Ticats This Week, built by Turkstra. Whatever your next home project is, build it better with Turkstra. Visit TurkstraLumber.com today.
This is it for Ticats This Week for 2024. I want to thank all of you for watching and listening. I'm RJ Broadhead with Mike Daly, Luke Tasker, and Steve Milton. We've had some fun over the season. It ended up a 7-11 season for the Tiger Cats. They missed the playoffs for the first time since 2017, but 29 first-year players got CFL experience, and that's only going to bode well for the Tiger Cats down the road. First touchdown of the season was scored by Ante Milanovic-Litre. The last touchdown of the season scored by Ante Milanovic-Litre. So he bookended the touchdowns. Bo Levi Mitchell had the great season where he broke the Tiger Cats' single-season passing record, and they beat the Argos 3 times this year. So there are some positives this year, and it was a good finish to the season. Let's start with some highlights. Luke, why don't you go first? Called a lot of the games, all but one this year with me, and what stood out to you?
Yeah, as I think back through the season, that we called a bunch of great games, and of course we had a long stretch of losses that was hard to figure out as well. But I think back to away in BC, to come back out west. That was at a pinnacle point in the season. Playoffs were certainly still a possibility at the time. You felt like you had to maybe win out or close to. And it was at around that 2/3 point in the season where there's, you're really starting to you got to get hot. You really start to push towards the playoffs, and they came back and both connected on 29 of 30 passes in a row to end that game, including the overtime effort where they won. So that stands out as a defining moment of the team to me, RJ. And on top of that would just be Bo's performances in general in the season he had.
Mike, what about you?
Yeah, that was that BC one was a lot of fun to watch. I think to the Labor Day game, and yeah, because of the surroundingness of Labor Day and everybody in Tigertown being excited. But if we remember, that's game 2 of the Chris Jones era, and that first game in Winnipeg where they ended up losing, but the defense was getting turnovers, and we all looked at each other and said, "Hey, you know what? This is a different team moving forward." And that Labor Day game was, Chad Kelly coming back, and he was confused. There was a lot going on for him on that Chris Jones defense, and that was the turning point where I was like, hey, you know what? This Ticats team, although the beginning of the year wasn't as good as we wanted it to be, this Ticat team has something going because they were able to win that Labor Day game in front of Tigertown, beating the Argos, and it was just a complete team effort with that one. So that's the one I think back to, and it was a great day and a lot of fun to be around. So that's my favorite memory of this season.
Steve?
I would say all of the above, plus the next Argo game when the field goal into basically an increasing wind that wasn't there, a few minutes earlier to win it, and the feeling on the field when that happened, because it continued something that Mike and Luke both alluded to, RJ, that there was something happening here, and it was keeping it going a little bit, and I really felt that was something. And the other part I would add to that is the development of the young receivers. On this team, the way Bo did that, and I think we'll talk a lot about Bo today. But the way Bo sort of brought those guys along, and believe me, it was Bo that brought them along, and that I think was a really outstanding thing. And Robinson is the guy, the guy I'm speaking about, but also and Shamar Bridges as well. And we found out this week that both of them do not need surgery, and both of them look like they might. So that's a big thing going into next year.
For me, it actually came late in the season when Bo Levi Mitchell ended up getting to 5,000 passing yards. I remember we joked around on Ticats This Week that it would take him probably the last 2 games to get there. He got the 450 yards passing against his former team, the Stampeders, and just put the cherry on top of the enjoyment of that game was Bo in the post game when he had 5 touchdown passes to tie a career high, and I said that to him, and then he said, no, I had 6, and he talked about the pick 6 he threw, so he was able to joke around about that too, and that's always fun when the players play along. So let's do it snake draft order here as we talk about what we'd like the Tiger Cats to improve in next year. Steve, we'll start with you.
Well, defense to start with, and I think that has started. You have to bring Chris Jones back. You've got to find a way to get him back in, or you've wasted that improvement in my mind. And this shocked me, but it didn't once I thought about it. When you talked about that game in BC, when we guys mentioned it earlier, that was the first game of the Jones year, it was also the only game, and they lost 11 times. It's the only game that they did not give up 30 or more points in a loss. Like, you can't, that's, the part that I have, I see that has to be strong. The team wasn't good enough. I mean, 8 wins, 7 wins, that's still not good enough. It's 3 short of being kind of good enough. If you get to 11, maybe you can get 12, maybe 13, you get to 10, you maybe get to 11, but you're not getting there from 7 and 8. So they need, they need to upgrade, and I think they need to upgrade a little bit on Canadian starters, and particularly maybe on the line an existing Canadian starter that can step right in there. And I think there's some of them going to be out there.
Mike?
Yeah, I think you have to bring some competition in, especially for that back end, that DB crew. We saw some guys take big steps and big jumps, and people are only going to get better. I'm thinking of Destin Talbert, Jonathan Moxey. Like, those guys stepped up pretty big from where we first saw them at the beginning of the season. But you need competition in there. You need to bring some fresh faces, whether it is through free agency, which I'm not a huge fan of going out and finding those big money guys, but you look at somebody like Jamal Peters, and they were able to bring him in, and he was that bright and shining spot on that back end. So some competition on that side, because early on I just felt like there was only a few people out there that were taking chances at making plays, really believing what they were seeing and going to take a chance to turn a game around. So that's where I'm going to look for. And to steal somebody else's, I do think the biggest thing to do is to bring back David Beard. But we'll talk about that as we go on. But that's one of the biggest keys that they'll have to do. So yeah, back end for me is number one focus, and then 2A is David Beard.
Well, just as a table of contents for anyone listening or watching, we are going to go through each position and talk about players and evaluations and what can be done or what should stand pat. Luke, your thoughts on what can be done to improve?
Yeah, I'll let the comments on defense lay where they are. I mean, I agree with all of that, and the Ticats are at the very bottom or near the bottom in most defensive statistical categories, and that is going to be a challenge to win games. Just the start of the season for 2025, you've got to see the Ticats protect the ball right at the start of the season, which they did not do. And even at times where they played maybe good enough to win games, they weren't going to outplay their negative turnover ratio. And so there has to be an emphasis and an execution with that right off the bat at the start of this year. And the crazy thing is, even if they really weren't playing all that better of football, apart from having a better ratio early on, they maybe end this season, 11-7. Probably could have been a reachable number, 10-8, and would have looked very different. Only changing that one variable. So a quicker start, and especially in the turnover category.
Pad your stats here a bit, Luke, with that. Tiger Cats had the 3rd fewest turnovers, but had the 8th fewest takeaways, and they ended up -5 ratio. They were -12 through 10 games, so during those last 8 games they did go +7, so that was a much better stretch for them. Yeah. But they would love to turn that minus into a positive, and Riders led the league in turnover ratio, and they were well into the positives. For me, I think the Tiger Cats need to get off to better starts, and they have to finish better. First quarter, they were shut out 7 times. They only won the first quarter 4 times all season. They won all 4 of those games that they got off to the good start, and did not win a first quarter on the road. And finishing, they blew 5 leads. 3 of them were in the final minute, and then last game against Ottawa, there was a minute 41 to go. So being able to close out those games, and they allowed 200 points in the fourth quarter this season. So starting and finishing are 2 areas that will be more relaxing for Tiger Cats fans if they can get off to a better start. None of this nail biting throughout the game and down to the wire. Even the final game of the season went right down to the wire, didn't go into the Tiger Cats' favor. But let's talk about the quarterback position. Let's start there. It's always the most talked about position, the most highlighted position, and coming into this season with Bo Levi Mitchell, Taylor Powell played a lot of last season. It was kind of in camp who was going to be the third string guy, and was Bo going to be able to perform, or is this now Taylor Powell's team? That was the story back in May going into the start of the season. Bo Levi Mitchell, there were some ups and downs, Steve, but he's under contract next year. He's got to be the guy, doesn't he?
He is the guy. There's absolutely no doubt. He is the guy. A couple of things to that, RJ. One of which, and we talked about this a couple of times over the last couple of weeks, he got stronger in the second half. And he got stronger in the second half of games in that second half most of the time. So that tells you something about what his conditioning is and what the positive feedback he gets from that, what he did with Marcellus Bowman, and what that'll influence him to do in the off season. So there is that. Secondly, till I sort of got under the tent, I never realized what kind of leader he is. I knew he was a leader, but I didn't know the manner in which he did it, the manner in which he just distributes his advice, his friendship, his jokes, the whole thing with the Boveralls, to go along with all of that. That was galvanizing for the team. It was galvanizing. It really, really was. And they rode him mercilessly, and he took it. And he rides guys, and I see it on the bus. I see it in the hotels. You guys have seen it as players, I'm sure. That part of it, and I mean, they've got their 4 quarterbacks for next year. They're all under contract. I mean, you're going to bring in some competition, of course, but I wouldn't be upset if they went in with what they have. And to me, Bo is the guy on this simple fact alone. Why would you have? They butted heads. Milanovic, a lot, and they both talked about it in the season ending on Saturday when they emptied out their locker. They both talked about it. They both realized that they had come to understand each other, and I think that was really, really, really important. And why would you, in any way, want to jeopardize that? And plus he developed all those other guys. The guy, one of the guys, got Patman on the rise too. So, and it's Bo. If he can hit the ground running with those guys, and especially if he does some off-season work with them, which I think he will, especially the Canadian guys, they'll hit the ground running again. I mean, this guy led the league by. Not only is he the only guy that hit 5,000, only one other guy hit 4,000 this year. I mean, that's pretty tremendous. Yeah, there were a lot of quarterback injuries. Tiger Cats stayed healthy at that position. That was actually rare for past few seasons. Bo ended up with 5,451 yards. That's a Tiger Cats single-season record. He passed Henry Burris. Taylor Powell completed 41 passes. Harrison Frost completed 8. And Talia Tungavailoa completed 1, the only pass attempt he had. Luke, you're our offensive mind in this Ticats This Week group. How do you evaluate the quarterback position?
Well, very impressive year by Bo, and even you can think back to some of the imperfections and things that you could improve on, even from what was a spectacular year. If Bo wants to come back, and based on what we asked him after the game, based on all his messaging to media and to fans, he certainly does, and he'll absolutely have the chance to do that and continue to play. And good for him. I mean, another Grey Cup to his career would be quite the solidifying factor of the excellence that has been his passing career, and it was fun to watch this year. I just, coming from a receiver standpoint, I like you said, Milty, the increase of those young receivers. They really came along. They came a long way. There was some clear miscommunications and some missing factor to the cohesiveness of the quarterback and receivers. It was apparent early in the season, and a lot of that got worked through. But the talk of the season would not be complete without mention of the drops and how many there were, and what that would have done for Bo, even if you cut the drops in half. And that's not. I don't think that
6,000 yards.
Yeah. I don't think that would even be unreasonable to say cut them in half, because you're not going to have a mistake-free season. You're not going to have a drop-free season as an offense. But to cut the drops in half, I don't think that would even be, that wouldn't be spectacular even to do. There was that many of them, especially early on, and then as it turned out in this last game of the season. So, very impressed by him. I'd love to see more of this receiver room and Bo working together. Interestingly, I thought of the passing game. We talked about this last week. The last time the Ticats, or the time when the Ticats had 3,000-yard receivers, was in 2017, and they missed the playoffs that year. Interestingly, Hank Burris's record was set. I think it was 2012 when the Ticats missed the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It's like we joked after the game, Mike. Like I just don't think receivers are important anymore. Maybe it's defense. Everyone's always said defense wins championships, and those years with the key with the thresholds for receivers being met, and the two record-setting years for the Ticats quarterback passing yards in a season are years that they missed the playoffs. It's just interesting. And there's only been 3 years since 2012, 2017, and 2024 now where the Ticats have missed the playoffs. So I don't know. You call it a strange coincidence, or maybe there's something to that, that those records have been broken years where they've been playing from behind, for instance, or really scrapping to get back into games maybe.
Mike, you want to jump in on the quarterbacks?
Yeah,
the receivers aren't important.
I'll definitely jump in on that for sure. No, but I'm with you, Luke. I think when you start looking at breaking passing records, it's because you have to pass a lot. And we heard Coach Milanovic talk about it when they're behind in games and the turnovers are happening and they're piling up points on the other side of the ball or the other team. You have to throw that much. So at the end of these games, you're sitting there. Defenses are in prevent for what seemed like half of the fourth quarter. So you're able to put some passing yards up that way, and that's probably why the rushing yards weren't so nice looking for the Ticats. But the one thing I'll say about Bo, I was super impressed with him all season, even when he was having the turnover issues. I think he got an unfair shake, and I shouldn't say unfair shake, but because you always blame, the quarterback is going to get blamed or praised depending on how the team does. And with the turnovers early on, what he did is there was definitely some miscommunication with him in that offense or him in that receivers, which caused a couple of those turnovers. But the most impressive thing about Bo throughout the season was his demeanor. You didn't hear him blame somebody. You didn't hear him complain, right? Even when he got sat, he wasn't complaining. He ends up coming back with, once he got benched, comes back, does what he does at the end of that season, battling through adversity. There's, you can feel when a team wants to play for somebody or when that person is just another person in the locker room. And that team wanted to play for Bo. And just because of all of those reasons I just stated, didn't blame anybody. People definitely in the building saw that it wasn't all his fault with some of the turnovers. Some were bad reads, but that's going to happen when you're throwing that much. I was super impressed with his demeanor all season long. I was super impressed with his relationship with the team and just how he battled back and how that team responded to him. It was it was really, really impressive on that side.
Most pass attempts, Tiger Cats had the most in the league, so that's, I guess, a correlation to the most passing yards. And to follow up on what you said there, Mike, Bo's a real guy. So often as a media member, you talk to a player and they let you finish and they answer the question. And if there was something in there that they didn't understand or didn't know, they wouldn't say anything. They just go check with the PR player with the team or talk to other teammates about it. Before the last game, I said to Bo, and again, he's got a great sense of humor. I said, hey, you get a win in this last game. You're the 10th quarterback ever to get to 100 wins. And he looks at me deadpan and says, I don't have 100 wins yet? So most guys wouldn't say that. They just be like, oh, gee, I thought I had 100 wins, and not ever say anything, just answer the question. So that's what I like about Bo. He's real. He has a conversation. It's not just you're peppering him with questions. It's back and forth. Another interesting thing about Bo, he's the Tiger Cats' most outstanding player. He's the only quarterback up for most outstanding player for their team this season, which I'd have to go back and look at the stats, but I believe that's rare. Don't you think, Steve?
Well, I think it is, and we all hit on it earlier that quarterbacks haven't been playing full seasons, and that's why there hadn't been any 5,000-yard guys since 2018. But that speaks to something else, is the tremendousness of the season that he's had. He's also stayed healthy. And give some credit to the offensive line who kept him clean a lot of that time. But really, he did this without enough of a running game. I mean, even before they started getting behind, I mean, they were getting behind all the time, but everybody knew they didn't have a lot of running game. They'd try it.
We're going to get to the running backs.
Okay, but I'm saying but it makes it more impressive what he did. Right, to basically, because they could come knowing
they knew they were going to pass the ball.
Yeah, so they could come if they wanted to, and he stayed healthy, and he did all of those things. So I was like everybody else pretty impressed with him, and as I said, getting stronger at the end of games and at the end of the year, and he just I had a thing with him all year, a lot of jokes, right? Because I tend to, like a lot of people, try to explain myself in the question, and he'll just go, and then he'll look away as if he's waiting for the end of the thing. Like it was a stand-up routine.
You
know, yeah, I know. So, not that I haven't done it here too.
You got so much knowledge up there, Steve. That's the problem.
Here's the problem, or the thing that I loved about Bo, and I loved this about Scott Milanovich too. Not only real guys about stuff, you knew where you stood. Right, you always know where you stand with Milanovich. Right, every player, every media guy. He says he was going to do this, and he did it. Right, we're going to go out to win and nothing else, and that stuck with it to the very last second of the season. But also both of them, before you'd even ask a tough question, and we all had to ask tough questions this year because they started 0-5. Before we'd even get that question in our mouth, they started to explain it. They took it over, and that makes that's a lot easier for people it makes you able to ask questions a little more honestly because they answer them honestly, and before you even ask the question, they'll take responsibility, particularly Bo.
Let's talk about the receivers, and I want to also go back to what Luke said. Luke is too modest, so I'm going to brag for him. In 2017, the three 1,000-yard receivers, Luke was one of those receivers and had many, many great years, as Tiger Cats fans know. So, Luke, let's start with you with the receivers. Number one in passing touchdowns, so receivers caught a lot of touchdowns. Two of the top four in the league in receiving yards were Tiger Cats. They had 4 in the top 14. No other team had that many. Your overall evaluation of this receiving group?
Well, they were a big part of the production from Bo, for sure. There was a lot of big first downs, big drives. You saw players, each of the guys in the starting 5, had big games for sure. To start with Tim White, I mean, that's another 1,000-yard season that he had. Certainly probably going to be East All-Star, I would think, and who knows beyond that. And I feel for him though. I mean, this season was plagued with drops for Tim. It's hard to ignore that or see the 1,000 yards and all the touchdowns by themselves, because there was really crucial ones, and I'll bet you that Tim's thinking about that himself. That's probably what's sticking with him as he's entering the off season and thinking about how he's going to get better this year. That would have to change, because he's a dangerous player. He made big plays. We saw explosive catches and some very challenging catches at times, big touchdowns. But the drops started off really bad. He got it together. He kind of crept back in, got it together, and then the season ended with a few more. So that's a challenge. Shamar Bridges, he was having, he didn't play in the last month of the season or so, and that's unfortunate. He was on track for a really great rookie season, or he did have a really great rookie season even without the last handful of games. And I'm very impressed with Shamar Bridges. I really liked watching him play. Really liked his route running, and I think he has the best yards after the catch body demeanor on the team. He does the right thing with his body. He gets vertical, and he does it very fast after the catch. He's smart about where to be and when to be there. So I'm very, very hopeful about Shamar Bridges' future and hopefully his health, and hopefully he can have a full off season of training. Loved Stephen Dunbar Jr. has gotten better since he's come back to the Ticats. He was impressive before, and he's getting better now. Keandre Smith, saw him make some great plays. Wasn't too sure about that touchdown celebration in the last game of the season, but that aside, I was impressed with him at times. He did some smart things in the slot, and I think, Steve, to your point about Bo bringing some of these guys along, I think Keandre Smith is a guy who benefits from Bo Levi Mitchell and understanding, especially the under coverage. And when you're playing on the inside, you have to deal with those low halves, Wills and Sams a lot. And so, that's a knowledge level that Keandre, you could see improvement there, and he made huge plays. And it goes on. I mean, I was at the short times we saw Ternowski in there. I thought sometimes I would say, wow, that. Who is that? Look, because you didn't realize he was in the game, and it's like that was a really smart thing to do, and it was Ternowski, and it's like, okay, well, it's the only catch we saw him for last month, but that was impressive.
That's got to be hard too as a receiver.
Yeah, Tommy Condell used to say to those kind of guys, like, you got to be a microwave, you got to heat up fast. He would say, so you got to be able to go in there and do it, and then get out, and that's it. That was your game. Other than the special teams, of course, which Ternowski plays successfully on and very well. And I'm trying to think who I haven't mentioned, but across the board, I was pleased with it. It's just those drops, and the health of Shamar Bridges, I think was harmful, because that was like I said, he's maybe the guy I was most impressed with physically on the field.
Yeah, he may have ended up leading the Tiger Cats in receiving yards if he stayed healthy. He finished 67 yards short of 1,000 yards, so I'm kind of calling him a 1,000-yard receiver, because he would have got there easily.
His yards per game was well on pace for 1,000. Yeah.
See, you got my back, just supporting my argument there. Mike, was it you last week that said Stephen Dunbar would not catch Tim White for the receiving yards?
No, it was me.
That was you, Steve?
Oh, very definitively. Yeah, remember that?
Yeah, that was you. Okay.
Yeah, 5 yards.
Yeah, so Dunbar had the big game, and Tim White didn't, and Tim beat him by 5 yards. To be honest, I agreed with you, Steve. I thought there really was a slim chance, but Dunbar finished so strong.
And he said he needed this season. He was very honest about that. He felt pretty bad coming off of last season out of Edmonton, and he just felt he really needed this type of thing. And now, what a time to have it, right? He's a free agent, and so he's one of those guys you're going to be looking at. I think to go get him, and they got two free agents in the receiving corps. Keandre would be the other one, and both those guys are looking at options here, and Ticats have to look at those options too. Do they? I would assume they want to get at least one of those guys back, probably both. Just to keep that core intact, so this group hits the ground running next year.
Mike, I want your thoughts on the receivers, but from a defensive perspective, who would you key on the Tiger Cats receiving corps if you were the opposition?
Ooh, that's a really good question, AJ. Yeah,
some depth there.
Yeah, I think you still have to worry about Tim just because of his speed. That's one of those issues where anybody that can take the top off, you got to be aware of where they are, right? Everything else you can deal with, and defenses nowadays are keep everything in front of you, make the offense execute all the way down the field, because they'll make a mistake at one point, and that's when you can capitalize. Those guys that can get over the top, those are the ones that blow the games open, right? Tommy Condell, so we'll keep talking about Tommy Condell but he had this thing called the toxic ratio, and it was like turnovers and explosions. And explosions really dictate games. And how many explosions a team can have will dictate that. And Tim is able to do that on that offense. I agree with what Luke's saying. This receiving core was good. They have good Canadian depth. I mean, when Luther comes back and he gets healthy, he was really starting to break out. Brandon O'Leary-Orange, right? Ternowski, Keandre. They have good Canadian depth there. I think this is a good group.
So the running game was fairly quiet this season. The Tiger Cats did pass the majority of times. Greg Bell did come on late and actually got himself into the top 10 in rushing yards, finished ninth. He had the second best yards per carry with 6.6. He played in 8 games. James Butler played in 10, and Butler finished 11 in rushing yards. Steve, what do you evaluate with this running game? How are you looking at it? Is Greg Bell the guy? Is James Butler still is a quality running back, but Bell seems like he's a game breaker.
Oh, I think that's the guy they want in there. Both the quarterback and the coaches say they like to have both Butler and Bell, but that isn't going to happen. And so I think we've seen the last of Butler here. But they do need some kind of power back that they can dress. In other words, I don't know if that's going to be a Canadian or whatever it is. Is Ontalitra good enough on that? I don't know. I sure loved what he did in that last game. He was outstanding, beginning to end. 5 special teams tackles as well. But I think you might need a power back in there that you can. Partly because Bell is slight, and is he going to play 18 games? So you want somebody that you don't have to go get. That's somebody already there. So a good special teams player that can also be a power running back. I think they need something there. And although it's fine to use Ontalitra lots of different ways, but I don't think you want him as your number 2 back, as your go-to back. I think they need a little help there, but I can't see Butler being back again next year, RJ. I just don't. Butler being back I just don't see that there's room for him on this team. It's got to be somebody that can also play special teams as well.
Ticats finished third last in rushing yards. What did you think of the rushing season the Tiger Cats had, Luke?
Yeah, at times there were certainly games where you wanted more, where it really felt like everything was on Bo, and when that happens, turnovers increase, and things can get challenging, and we'll wait to talk about the offensive line, but spoiler, I think they were pretty fantastic for the whole season, but. The run game, some inconsistency and some really quiet spells of the season where it seemed like the Ticats couldn't move the ball at all on the ground. I think back to during the times that I played, C.J. Gable stood out in my mind as a guy. He was just a great running back, doing what running backs do, that is carrying the football and getting vertical and tough first downs and ball security and that stuff. But his unique add-in was he was exceptional in protection. He was above and beyond what other backs could do in pass protection, and that's crucial. And if you're gonna run a 6-man protection in the passing game, and have your 5 spread receivers there, and keep your back in, if a guy who's really exceptional at that can that can get him on the roster even as much as being a great running the ball really well can. So. There has to be that balance, and I think of Sean Thomas Erlington for all the years he played in Hamilton. There were games where he started for us at running back, and he was capable of explosive plays on the ground. He was very good catching out of the backfield, as was C.J. Gable. Very good catching out of the backfield, but he was also Canadian and great on special teams. And Sean Thomas Erlington was an asset to a football team. I mean, he was a real asset. And I think you're right, Milty. You got to have the depth at running back has to contribute on special teams. It's very, very important. Your number 1 contributors are your linebackers and DBs. All the depth there, all the depth behind the starters, even the starters are producing on special teams. You can find a receiver now and again like Ternowski who's gonna be a contributor. And then you've got to go into your running backs, and get those guys producing with the rest of the defensive guys. So that would be a huge find. If Greg Bell, because he ran the ball well, his average yards per carry, and he had explosives, but again there was just some inconsistency at times in the run game across the board, whether that was on Bell or not. That you'd hope to see sort of shored up going forward.
Let's jump ahead to the offensive line, Mike. And you mentioned David Beard earlier, and let's touch on that. You think he is a key guy that has to stick around for the Tiger Cats?
Yeah, he's the voice of that offensive line that we've all talked about. That has been unbelievable. right? The reason Bo Levi Mitchell was able to pass for as many yards as he did and keep him clean and in the pocket. And I think when you are talking about a person that communicates on the field, so does more than just their job, right? Goes out there, is identifying defenses, picking up blitzes, telling everybody else what to do. That's one of those positions that you need a ton of experience for, right? In the working world, those are the type of people that run businesses, run companies, because those type of people are hard to find. But when you do, you got to keep them around. And David Beard was that guy for the Ticats. He was the one to get everybody lined up for as well as they did. That rested on David Beard's shoulder. And obviously, Bo Levi Mitchell had a little bit to play in that as well. But you need to bring him back, because to be able to take, whether it's Revenberg or Coulter, and have to teach them a center position, or maybe one of the new younger guys, it is such a tough thing for a new center to come into a team and be able to have that cohesion. And we saw it in that, I always attribute the offensive line to the defensive backfield where I played, is those two positions need to communicate and work together the most. And if you don't have that person that's sitting there guiding people around for right or for wrong, right? There's always that saying, if we're all wrong, we're all right. Well, that's that guy, and that's David Beard. So he's absolutely imperative to bring back. And just to round that out, I thought Bordner had a great season, right? They're trying to still figure out that other tackle spot. But between the three on the inside that I mentioned, Bordner, they have some guys that can play. So Beard is going to be that focus.
Yeah, Bordner, a rookie, he really solidified that left tackle spot. You've got Brendan and Brandon over there on that left side with Revenberg, who is always one of the best. Beard at center, Woodmansey at right guard, and then Jordan Murray finished the season, but Quentin Barrow had a pretty good rookie season until he got hurt as well. That seems to be, for the first time in probably the 4 years we've been doing Ticats Audio Network, Steve, that this offensive line is pretty solid going into next year.
Which makes the point that Mike's been making all day here absolutely relevant. You've got to have that glue together on it. I mean, I think the guy they'd probably try to develop more might be Nate Duguay-Dumas,
their first pick.
Who's the first pick, and a good first pick, as it turned out. If he had not been injured, and I think that delayed some of his development a little bit, but he can play probably at least a couple of the spots across there. He can be a guy that can finish the game at center, but you need center has a lot of things to do, has been well explained here by the guys who actually played, so that you really got to get him back. I mean, that's obviously who they have to focus on immediately right away. But I thought they did a really good job there. And remembering that the couple of tackles that they had this time last year or in February, they thought were going to go there. They thought that maybe Joel Figueroa would be in there. They didn't. I mean, I think they knew that they were losing Chris Van Zyl, but they also had Kemp on the other side too, and then the two young kids came along. And I would have liked to see Barrow not have been injured. Of course, you don't want to see any player injured, but that he would have been further along in his development. I think he's the guy that comes out next year as basically the starter on that side.
Yeah, that's interesting. And Dayton Black, first pick from 2 years ago, was injured all season. So he's another guy that gets another off season. He'll be entering his third season next year. Luke, what does it mean for an offense to have that offensive line? We never talk about it in the broadcast unless there's a mistake. We joke about it all the time, and Tiger Cats' offensive line's been so good. We probably didn't talk about it as much as we should have. What does it mean for an offense to have that good line?
It's foundational. It starts with blocking and tackling. I mean, that is the line of scrimmage is where the strength of a team begins. And those inside three, I mean, I worry that teams, franchises, this is nothing to say of the Ticats, just like in the industry of football, that like they start to see David Beard, Brandon Revenberg, and they say, getting a little older in their career, is it time to replace these guys? Is it time to trade them while they're still valuable? Is it time to not re-sign them and go someplace else? And I think I think there's a tendency to outsmart yourself sometimes there. And Brandon Revenberg, he's still that same angry gorilla that I knew 8 years ago. I mean, I just love watching him play, and David Beard as well. I think he's a great leader in there, like you've said, Mike, and Coulter Wood-Manzi. They all have the brand of Ticat offensive linemen, and they just I think they're an absolute asset to the offense and to the franchise. And as a whole, that group of five and the guys, over the course of the season, the whole offensive line room, that was impressive. I mean, think about this. They were one off, I believe, of being tied for the lead of fewest sacks allowed. So they were just one away from leading the league in fewest sacks allowed, with a team that passed way more than other teams. So they had to take way more reps at pass protecting and prevent all those sacks. And they had Bo Levi Mitchell, who's not exactly going to be breaking pockets and escaping dicey situations in the backfield. Bo's not going to win games on his legs, though he's smart in the backfield. His experience and savvy, he moves correctly and has a good feel. But he's not flipping and turning out of sacks in the backfield and saving that stat. So against way more opportunities, they throwing more than any other team threw, they allowed the fewest sacks, and often, like we've talked about for the receivers and for Bo's stats, at times in the game where defenses and defensive lines and DNs knew that they were going to be passing the ball. And offensive linemen hate that. If there's very little threat of run because of the situation of the game or the down and distance, it's very hard to pass protect when a DN can tee off and when secondary blitzers can time things up and they know they're not going to be attacked by a run block. And so that was their stats almost don't even speak loudly enough. There's sort of that second layer of analysis of how good that they performed this year, and I would say they certainly were the best offensive line unit in the CFL.
Yeah, that's a great point when you think about the volume of passes that the Tiger Cats had and so few quarterback sacks allowed. Let's get onto the defense, Mike. Let's do it. Let's talk defense. You've been waiting patiently. Most points allowed this season. It's a reason the Tiger Cats did not make the playoffs. The three teams that allowed the most points this season in the CFL are the three teams that did not make the playoffs. So there is a correlation there with defense does win. Your overall look at this defense, let's start there. Give you the wide range.
Sure, yeah. You're right, RJ. If you give up a lot of points, you're going to lose a lot of games. That's some hard-hitting analyst stuff right there. It's
never would have guessed that.
Yeah, that's
well. To be fair, though, the inverse is not exactly true this year. Scoring a lot of points doesn't necessarily win you games.
That's right. We saw that, right? That's fair to say. Yeah. I think when you talk about this Ticats team being young, I think to the defense. I think to the back end, and I'm talking linebackers and defensive backs. I thought that D line was pretty good. They didn't. Nick Usher, I thought, broke out as a pretty big run stopper, right? Dwayne Hendricks was hurt a little bit, but I wasn't really concerned about that D-line. Where you started to get concerned was the linebacking group and the defensive back group, and just because of the age. Like, that's it. We've talked about, Luke and I talk about this all the time, and I've said this before, is you need a bunch of years under your belt, and by a bunch, like at least 2 or 3, until you can really start to understand what offenses are trying to do to you and where you should be looking, and when you feel comfortable and more than just doing what's on that piece of paper of a playbook. And that's where this Ticats team struggled. I know early on with Mark Washington, his defense is a little more complex, and you need people to understand what they're doing out there, and that just wasn't the fit. So then Chris Jones comes in, and it helps, but there's still those plays to be made from people that have experience of being out there. So, it wasn't, what we wanted as a Ticats team and a defense, but I'm excited for next season because those guys like Destin Talbert, who I mentioned, Jonathan Moxey, who I mentioned, you think of Ryan Baker, right? Even DQ Thomas was all over the place, and Ray Wilborn. Those guys from the beginning of season to like those last couple of games, they were standing out all over the place. So that just goes to show you the what experience can do, and those guys coming back is going to be awesome for this defense because they will feel a little more comfortable. They will be able to take those chances at plays. So this defense is going to be trending up. If we have to put something on it, it's trending up. But yeah, it definitely a sore spot for this Ticats team.
I want to add on Ryan Baker, a 5th-round pick out of UBC. He didn't play in the Tiger Cats' first 6 games of the season. He was on the practice roster and got an opportunity and went in and really played great. And I talked to him, and he was happy and excited, but he was basically coming into this year to learn and hit the weight room, get a little bigger, get a little stronger, and next thing you know, he's starting at linebacker and came up with a really big stop earlier in the year on a 3rd and short that created a turnover. So that was his highlight that he said. Steve, how important is it to have Chris Jones back for this defense?
Imperative. Absolutely imperative. I mean, the whole deal about changing from holding back to being aggressive, not being afraid to make mistakes, it comes out of his psychology and sociology. It absolutely, I think, imperative. He wants to come back. We'll see if it can work out. I think it's going to happen. Absolutely, it's going to happen. I mean, he was living with a head coach, so I think that's an absolutely important thing. Or I think you'd have to start again. Right, you'd have to start again with a philosophy, and for some of these guys, it'd be their 3rd in little bit more than a year. I don't think that defense is good enough, guys. Talent-wise, I think that needs some more help. I think it needs more at linebacker, and for sure, I think there's not enough really good pure tacklers on this team. They're susceptible to the run both by a quarterback, but a good running back, good running backs, top running backs in the league. Now Brady ate everybody up. But except for maybe 1 or 2 teams, but they really had struggled against some really good running backs when they played them, and part of that was inexperience. Of course, it's the angles of the games, and you're going to commit. You're going to commit to Baker, I think, because he's got something there. But I think you really, and I don't know which of those guys they need to not have back or they need to upgrade on. I mean, you could probably get by with all of them, but again, you're still 7, 8 wins, 9 wins, 9 wins at the best, a couple of things. So I think it needs some upgrading there. I like the fact that the short, so the short side of the field is basically taken care of now. Jamal could have played if these were playoff games, not regular season games. He would have played.
That's Jamal Peters and Destin Talbert.
Jamal Peters and Destin Talbert right there, and then also Katsantonis assigned. So that's basically it. And as Mike talked about, the two sort of synchronized swimming units on a team are the offensive line and the defensive backfield. They got to play together. I think the other side needs some work, for sure. And I think they may have the one in-house now. I was actually surprised, but I guess he was hurt, was that Dantzler didn't play. And he came out of the NFL, and I think he wants to be there, and he could be the guy there, but I think that other side they've got to work on a little bit in the secondary. But you can't replace more than 1 or 2 guys if you really want that kind of continuity. Sometimes it's better to live with a guy who might be a touch less skilled there for the fact that he's played with the other 2 guys beside him.
Interesting you brought up Dantzler. He has a lot of NFL experience, and he's good friends with Jamal Peters. Probably after Peters re-signed for next season, all of a sudden Cam Dantzler signed too. So there might have been a little friend influence there. But Dantzler was going to play, I think, 3 games left. And you're right, Steve, he did get injured and just never got a chance to get CFL experience. But maybe watching will help. Luke, from your offensive mind, what did you see from this defense from the start of the season to the end?
Yeah, one of those years where just more games we might have seen continued progression. I think things were coming together, and Chris Jones only had half a year, and I think it's on the right track. They'll make changes. It's not going to be the same personnel as there was, and hopefully they get a set of guys who are aggressive and can play Chris Jones schemes aggressively. But I think they will. since the Ticats audio network has been in existence, RJ, and we've been calling games, and I'm more hopeful going into this off season and into 2025 than I have maybe about any other year. Not that I was not hopeful, just like I really think that the Ticats are on the cusp of turning into the best team in the CFL, and defensively, there was just such confusion. You could just smell the confusion in the early part of the season. And if you're an offensive player, a receiver specifically, and if you're young and you don't know a lot, you can kind of get by being a robot. You just memorize your play and run like it looks on paper, and at least you're not going to look like an idiot. But that's not football. Like you're not great yet, but you could probably fill a space, and maybe nobody will know that you don't know anything about defense, and you're just learning everything. But you can't really be a robot and be a defensive player. It's reactionary by definition. So you have your play, and if it's cover 3 and you're the high half, once the play starts, things change. Like you got to start reacting and making very quick decisions. And so if you have early on, it looked like everyone was frozen, like they couldn't make decisions, like they weren't sure that they should do the thing or should I do it? Should I move here? Should I float here or not? Should I break on this route, or do I need to stay deep? And it just looked like that kind of indecision. And you can't on defense. And so as I think Chris Jones found a way to help guys, start being aggressive. You have to, and start taking, the high percentage chances and taking some risks and playing a little bit harder. And so I just think more of that, more time, a training camp with it, a year under all those young guys, or all those young guys that will be back, another year for those, another off season of training. You just your brain digests all those decisions that you made throughout a football season, and you kind of are better at or if you're put in that same position again. And so, I'm excited. I'm very excited for the defense. And I think we could see a very talented Hamilton defense next year.
I just want to take a moment to give a shout out and a thank you to our audio and video editor, David Butko. He does a great job on Ticats This Week and the Ticats Audio Network. And I want to do a bit of David's job for him right here. 49 minutes into Ticats This Week is the highlight of the show, the biggest point that was made, and it's that the Tiger Cats are on their way to being the best team in the CFL. Way to bury the lead, Luke. Where was that a minute into the show?
Yeah, sorry, Dave. You'll have to fish for that so you can edit it out. But I really do. I wish
edit it out.
Yeah, or so he can. Yeah, so he can, whatever he does, copy and paste it to the advertise. I don't know, whatever the tech guys do. Dave will figure it out.
That's exactly what
I do. If there was more games, it's amazing that it came down like it did. And you mentioned earlier in the show, RJ, the turnover ratio from the first half to the second half. And there's more stats that followed like that. It just, you wish there was more time in the season, but it does make me hopeful for next year.
See, even the Ticats Audio Network has to get better for next year. Luke's got to start with that. There's a lot that we can work on.
I think we should have uniforms next year for the podcast.
At least adjustable sleeves at all times.
Retractable, yeah, of course, yeah.
You're not talking Boveralls, are you?
Oh, Boveralls, maybe.
I don't know. Maybe. We'll have to do some contract negotiating on that.
That's right. Yeah.
If it's Boveralls, raises all around for Ticats this week. Well, where's the support on that?
Oh yeah,
I thought there'd be a lot of nodding and let's get raises.
I'm in.
Let's touch on Mark Leggio. He had a good year. Finished on a streak of 15 straight. If you look at the stats, you're going to see he finished at 89.6%. I round that up to 90. So finishing the season at 90% for Mark Leggio. Steve. Yeah. Pretty solid at that position, and he's under contract for a couple more years.
Solid enough that they said, let's bring the whole unit back, right? And that's part of their plan to sort of, I think that's why I think you'll see Beard signed right away. That was a signal to me that they're going to go out and get the things that they think can continue among their own among people there, and this really was good for his head. He got, he was playing on a prove himself year, and I think it was really good for him to have done it. He had a couple of great moments, couple of ones that weren't too great, but he improved. One thing he really improved on was placement of kickoffs. He added 5 yards, and where he put the ball. Their downfield coverage, part of it was related to where he put the ball on those kickoffs compared to what he'd done in his past, and I think that's a really big thing. It's really important on the ratio with the way they're set up now. They got a Canadian and a global in there. I think they'll get a. If we're talking about kicking in general here, I think that Nick will get at least a look in a mini camp in the next few weeks. But I'm thinking he'll be back here too. So, but I think Mark and his confidence is up, and he really needed this year in his career. Look, he's been a winner and an all-star wherever he's played on the way up, and he seems to find a way to do it. So I think they're happy. They know his exact distance. He never BS's anybody about it's 54 today into this wind, 52 going the other way, which you have to have that kind of honesty, and he has it. So the three guys work together really, really well, and they were all hoping for each other to sign.
Nick Constantino came in as a global rookie punter out of Melbourne, Australia. Let's not forget about his path to the starting position. Bailey Flint was the incumbent. He finished last year. Constantino beat him out, and Corey Vedvik was on the practice roster for about half the season as well. So if Constantino faltered, Vedvik would have stepped right in there. So that was a pressure position for a rookie. Mike, your thoughts on Constantino, and I also want your thoughts on the special teams coverage as well.
Well, yeah, I thought Nick Constantino did a great job. Like Steve said, placement of kicks is such an important thing, and not even just placement of kicks, but the unknown nature of how he could show that he was going one way or the other, keeping the returner guessing whether it was going to go the boundary side or whether it was going to go the field side. He was very good at that, and that isn't a testament to how well this cover teams unit played. I mean, there was times where we were like, hey, we're facing Janneri and Grant. We're going to have to see what this team does. And they just stepped up every single time. And so a lot of that does have to go with Nick Constantino. I thought the special teams got better. Again, I take everything we said about the experience side of the defense and put that right onto the special teams as well. Because when you have so many new young guys, especially new young Canadians who are going to be the majority of those special teams guys, you're going to struggle because, like Luke said, it's all reactionary based. So when you haven't seen a ton of football, you're running around there with a chicken with your head cut off in a car crash all the time, and that's how I attribute special teams to. It's just
a chicken with their head cut off in a car crash.
Yeah, I don't know.
You got a license.
That is chaos.
To explain it, it's just it's a street fight, a 40-yard sprint street fight with bodies flying. Like it is. How do you? It's like the movies where you're running and you'll see a body fly across your face this way. Somehow they got picked up off their feet, and then somebody falls in front of you, and people are yelling and screaming. It sounds like Braveheart. That's what's going on out there. When you're not really sure what's going on, it's hard to play. So they're young with the special teams, but. One person I do have to shout out, and I say it all the time, and we don't give him enough love, is Gordon White, the long snapper. He is the best long snapper in the league. We talk about this all the time. He could, if he wanted to, if he wasn't as good as long snapping as he was, he could have made the team as a linebacker. And he gets out downfield. He throws ropes. That's what we call it in the long snapping business, is throwing ropes, throwing darts. He gets those things back as quick as possible, which eliminates blocks, and he makes all the tackles downfield. It's impressive, and not only that, he has a little bit of Simone Lawrence-esque in him, where he will not shut up. Essentially, is the best way to put it. He just keeps on talking, makes everybody hate him. So then everybody else around him gets better because people are so focused on Gordy White. So, Yeah, he's the best in the league, and those three, the unit as you call it, they hang out together, and they're as good as it comes.
Yeah. Thanks for shouting him out, Mike, because he does do a great job. Another guy that, when there's no mistakes, you don't often talk about the long snapper, but he does have a few tackles in there. And I was talking to him, and he said a lot of players know him now, so the constant chirping isn't quite as effective. They know that it's going to happen. One other position here, guys, is the returner, kind of a position in flux. Lawrence Woods did have a punt return touchdown, but the Tiger Cats used 7 players to return kicks this year, including Woods, Tim White, Jonathan Moxey, Smoke Harris. Remember Smoke? Jordan Bird, Jaden Price, and Isaiah Wooden finished the season, and Wooden actually ended up on the Pro Football Focus best returner from this past week. So... Is he the guy? Is this a work in progress going into next season? Luke, I know you played with one of the best returners all time, and it's always been a strength of the Tiger Cats. Steve can probably touch on that after the return game, but do you see anyone here, or would you like to see that position improve next season?
Luke, weren't you a returner at one point?
I returned. I was in a pinch. I could field the ball. Yeah.
Okay. So we're talking. We're talking to our Ticats Audio Network returner specialist as well.
That's right.
No, I was like the second man in for a 2 split. If like wind or for whatever reason we had 2 punts, so I was just like the blocking off returner oftentimes, and then I like returned a game in Montreal for whatever reason. Everyone was hurt or something like that. Jeff was like, Luke, you're your only choice, your only option. Get in there.
Well, that's a confidence builder.
Yeah, and then Jeff comes to the blockers and says, "Hey guys, you really got to block this week. So we can't get
you gotta
Luke
be
hurt.
stout."
Do
you remember what your long was in the game?
I don't know. I had one that was like pretty good. It was like 15 or 20 yards or something like that, but nothing spectacular. What was the question?
What a way to finish. The return game.
The return game. No, I mean all year, RJ. You go to commercial after the punt, and you and I were like, "What's happening here? We cannot get it going in the return game." Statistically, the Ticats kickoff average was the worst. It was the least in the kickoff return average, was the lowest in the league. It just was a battle all year, and it was a Rolodex of guys though, and with injury, it's tough. I don't like. I think it's hard to do a starting receiver be the returner. I find that's like Tim White is not the answer for the return game. Starting anybody is tough. I mean, it's a lot of running to be the returner taking kicks and punts. But I don't know. Interesting that this last game, all of a sudden, the Ticats have a guy out there, with a little bit of success, and so maybe there's something going forward, but not enough film or time to say right now. But certainly something that could use an increase in the offseason.
Yeah, I think. There just isn't enough evidence at the moment. But RJ and I were watching the practice last week, wasn't it, RJ?
Yeah, it
and
was.
We both raised our head at the same time, and we didn't see the number. We said, "What was that?" And it was a guy on an end around. It was a fly sweep, wasn't it?
Yep.
And it was Wooden. And we both looked at each other and said, "What the hell was that?"
He stood out.
Like it's one of those things when you see, when you watch practice in hockey and the guys are wearing practice sweaters and you see Connor McDavid out there, very few players actually stand out and jump to your attention. This jump caught both of our attention, was the speed and the jump cuts. He's pretty good. Now that doesn't mean that he can get used to this game, but he and they only had him do punts, right? I don't think he did any.
You're right.
Kickoffs, right? The kickoff return was, that's where it's really got to happen. And how much of that is related to that one level of blocking that we talked about earlier in the year that just wasn't happening, and that should get better over time, especially if Dennis McKnight comes back for a full season and has a training camp. But they'll bring guys in. They have to, and they'll sign receivers or whatever with that might be a secondary receiver but can be the returner. And this guy's a secondary receiver too. He's got the same kind of speed as White.
Yeah, it's a good point, Steve. That the kickoff return, that's the true return of the CFL. I mean, that's just skill, and the scheme has to work. The returner has to understand it, know when to go to the scheme, know when to abandon it because the kick was placed in such a way.
Real tacklers,
all that.
real tacklers you're playing against. Yeah.
The punt return in the CFL is a headsy position, and I think it should be it's the number one job of the returner to get the ball back to your offense. Period. That's your job. But your second job should be drawing the no yards infraction as frequently as you can. The best punt return stat in the league was 13 yards, and that's with Toronto punt return average. And as we all know, the no yards is a 15-yard penalty. And RJ, we always said the best returner in the CFL is the no yards penalty.
Yes,
and that player. Yes, that player has to be headsy. He's got to be smart. He's got to be deceptive in how he sets up for the ball. He has to know when he can attack a short punt to try to touch it, just slap it, just hit it out of bounds. There's all sorts of things to know and to be impactful that way. So yeah, the Ticats need some work in the return game.
Thinking back to the season with 18 games, I'll let you jump in a sec, Mike. With 18 games, I don't think it's a stretch to say 12, 15 times we'd go to commercial. And you'd say to me, Luke, why didn't they just come up and touch that football? It would have been no yards.
We saw one in Ottawa in the last game of the season here, and I can't even remember which team it was. But I thought all you had to do there is sprint forward and touch it. You can kick it if you want; doesn't matter. You just have to make sure it hits your body, and you're giving your team 15 yards. And then there's the hidden yardage of letting it bounce back to you, and that it's a huge missing piece in the understanding and the execution of some of the players out there.
Mike?
Yeah, I'll step in quick. Isaiah Wooden, I thought, did a good job for that one game that I saw. So I remember everything I was talking about, the chicken head cut off in a car crash and all that kind of stuff. Well, we
remember.
You need to find a returner that's going to say, okay, I'll catch this ball and then I'll run through all of that stuff and almost as bravely as possible, right? Because that's really what is going to designate a good returner. And I thought Lawrence Woods had a little bit of that, but Isaiah Wooden showed that a little bit in that last game. So, yeah, there's always going to be guys that come in. I'm going to put a lot of it on the blockers as well. A lot of those return games is giving your returner some space to do that. And like I said, the experience just wasn't exactly there with that Ticats special teams unit. So, hopefully with the addition of some players and who they end up finding, and then also just a little more experience, you get some of that play out of those blockers on those teams.
All right, guys, let's do a quick look ahead to 2025. I think a big key was the 29 first-year players that got experience with the Tiger Cats. A lot was learned that you can't replace that game experience. I tend to agree with Luke. Tiger Cats are trending up and are going to be one of the top teams in the CFL next season. Steve, what do you think?
They're trending up. Again, I'll stick with this. They need a few better players that are starters, and I think they need a couple of Canadian starters that are impactful that they don't have at the moment. Not that they don't have some Canadians that are impactful. Obviously, they do, but I think they need more. I think they need a couple more.
Mike, a look ahead to 2025?
And I think this team's capable of 10, 11 wins, and I think that's what you want, and then build from there.
I think there just needs to be some competition on the back end of that defense. I think you need to bring in some, like Steve said, bring in some new guys, get David Beard back. I think that's the biggest one, 2025. You're probably not going to have the same season from Bo that you did this season. Yeah, that's a very hard thing to do and hard to expect. So you'll have to find ways to win games and put points up different ways. But yeah, I think main focus number one has to be David Beard, and then number two has to be that back end. Get some competition in there and just push some people and see who comes out of the fire.
Love it. Last word to you, Luke.
Well, I'm just mostly excited. Like I said, sometimes it's hard to know anything or have any expectation for next year. There's a lot of time and a lot of changes that are going to be made. I don't feel that way this year. I actually am genuinely excited for what the team looks like in 2025, and it feels primed to me for them to build off of the second half of this season.
Well, fourth season of the Ticats Audio Network is in the books, and we want to thank all of you for listening and watching to the games and all the shows on the Ticats Audio Network. We are looking forward to 2025. It's going to be a great season, and thank you guys for making a great show this season. Steve Milton, Luke Tasker, Mike Daly. I'm RJ Broadhead. Thanks for watching Ticats This Week.
This has been the Ticats This Week, built by Terkstra. Whatever your next home project is, build it better with Terkstra. Visit TerkstraLumber.com today. Like and follow the Ticats Audio Network on Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast content, and get a deeper understanding of your Hamilton Tiger Cats.